Before our eyes is Blair, a beautiful and slender brunette with deep green eyes, and she will be the heroine of this story. Now she is communicating with the elderly Madame Saint, who decided to treat Blair to cookies that she had baked too many. Our heroine says that about 4 years ago she was kicked out of the mansion where she worked as a maid, and with her severance pay she was able to rent a house. Almost all of Blair's savings were spent on this, and it was almost impossible to find a job, and so the girl was left penniless. But it was the kind-hearted Madame Saint who gave the girl a job, preventing her from becoming completely bankrupt. And for this, Blair is grateful to her for the rest of her life. Although sometimes the old woman starts talking about how it's time for Blair to look for a husband, especially at such an age, which every time confuses our heroine. But this does not prevent her from thanking Madame Saint as nicely as possible for the donated cookies, because these pastries are known as the best among all the bakers in the capital. After leaving work, Blair comes to the market, where traders and buyers mix in one noisy stream of people eager to finish their business before dark. And this time, while choosing vegetables for dinner, Blair really thought about the words of her employer, because she was really already 24 years old, and she had never found a loved one. Having chosen everything she needed, she thanks the merchant and leaves this noisy and crowded market, in which everyone was looking for their place and their benefit, continuing to think about marriageable age. However, in the other world in which she once lived, 24 years is just the beginning of life, the time when one does not think about marriage. And here and now she runs home, anticipating the preparation of her favorite tomato paste, for which she bought everything necessary. Suddenly, Blair sees a luxurious golden carriage standing in front of his house, clearly belonging to some noble lord. The girl feels alarmed at the sight of this carriage, which, it would seem, has come for her, and cannot drive away the thoughts swarming in her head that something terrible may await her. But then she notices a handsome man standing nearby in expensive clothes. His hair was the color of ash, and his eyes were red as blood, and the abyss, passion, and pride shone in them. The girl's heart trembled. She could never imagine that she would see such a handsome man right in front of her house. Blair approaches him, asking who he is and why he is here, but at the same time she finds herself thinking that this man seems painfully familiar to her. He calls her by name, after which she stops in shock, after which the man continues to say he did not expect to see the girl so close again. He approaches her, asking why she ran away, while Blair, on the contrary, retreats further away, still not knowing who he is or what his goals are. The man continues his push, telling Blair that if she wanted to run away and thus break her promise, she shouldn't have hugged him, even though Blair doesn't understand what he's talking about. After all, she made a promise in this world to only one person, Lady Chloe, whom she once served. The realization of what is happening covers Blair. She understands, but cannot believe that the man in front of her is none other than Chloe herself, who has changed her gender. The heroine cannot take her eyes off him, frozen in horror, while she hears the new name of her former mistress, Claude. Having named him, Claude breaks into a wide smile, after which the entire surrounding space dissolves and the girl falls into darkness. Everything that happened turns out to be a dream, from which our heroine wakes up in a cold sweat, sitting on the floor of the room. The girl, continuing to sit on the floor, sighs with relief when she finally understands that the terrible dream that tormented her was not reality. A dream in which she quit her job with a scandal and ran away, and Mistress Chloe turned into a wonderful man and found her. Finally, having come to her senses, Blair stands up, quietly speaking about how she could even dream about this, but her phrase is heard by another person who is here. Namely, here is Mrs. Chloe herself, a young and fragile girl with ashen hair and pale skin, whom Blair serves. Chloe, without being distracted from the book of interest, asks in an indifferent and cold voice what exactly her maid could have dreamed about. Blair, after thinking a little, retells her dream in detail, not missing from her monologue the fact that Chloe herself became a man in this dream, which is why the book falls out of the latter's hands. Chloe's face takes on a puzzled look, as if Blair had said something that would turn the world upside down several times over. Not understanding the mistress's reaction, Blair suggests just laughing at her story and forgetting, because there is no point in it. But her words flew past Chloe, who had now completely forgotten about the book and now looked intently, like a predator, at the maid as a victim, asking her only one question: what kind of man she was. This is not the formulation of the question that our heroine could have expected, and now she will have to describe herself to Chloe, no matter how strange it may sound. She cannot say directly that Claude was not just handsome. When he began to whisper, looking down at Blair, the girl's heart began to beat faster. Therefore, all she can say to the hostess is that Claude was good-looking, but nothing more, but in a tone that raises questions in Chloe. In addition, Blair flippantly adds that Claude was very cute, and both girls freeze in an awkward pause. Without thinking twice, Chloe kicks the maid out the door, telling her to do some useful work while the latter thinks about what she said wrong. Blair Thorpe, that's her name in this world, she recalls. But in another, her native world, everything is completely different. There, in the real world, she was just an ordinary freshman named Lily, overwhelmed with assignments and work, dreaming of a better life. But now she is here, and she has absolutely no memory of how she could have ended up here, or how she became a girl named Blair Thorpe. She only knows that she is in the world of a novel that she read, with a discreet and mediocre title, namely The Lady and the Dog, and she realized this only 2 years after entering this world. Blair herself was not mentioned in this novel, and from what she learned during her 4 years in this world, she was supposed to be just an extra. But now she has become an important character. True, now this important character has received the task of cleaning the stairs from the manager and is wondering why Mrs. Chloe kicked her out the door. Perhaps it's because Blair called Claude cute, she continues to think, but it's unclear why she would react like that over something so trivial. All this upsets our heroine, who now regrets that she even raised the conversation about this unfortunate dream, especially during this period of the novel. Chloe is the main character of the novel, but now, as Blair realized, the events of the novel itself have not yet begun, and this is the most difficult time for the young mistress, who is being mistreated. She, seeing her maid concentrated more on thinking than on cleaning, asks her how long she is going to scrub the stairs, which scares Blair a little. The gaze of a noble girl easily notices on the hair of a young maid what should not have been there, namely foam from cleaning, which is not suitable for neat people. Turning around, she orders Blair to get herself in order. Otherwise, she may not come to her room anymore. And as she leaves, our heroine groans in disappointment at the head of the stairs. Towards evening, in a cozy and warm room where candles glowed in the corners and on the table, all the castle servants gathered to enjoy dinner after a productive day of work. Blair, having finished her work, like the others, also came to have dinner, but as she walked to the table, she could not help but notice wary glances from all sides. At the table itself, the maids sitting nearby suddenly get up and immediately leave, not wanting to be near our heroine. This behavior among the servants around her began from the very moment when Blair became Chloe's personal maid. But now the girl has become accustomed to this clumsy bullying at work. And right now she is not interested in the opinions of other girls, but in the delicious warm dinner lying right in front of her. Surveying her meal, our heroine notices golden chicken legs, fried until crispy, coated in spices and sauce. She carefully looks around, checking if any of the servants or cooks are watching her and making sure that no one cares about her. After which he quietly hides the meat right in his apron, without attracting attention to himself, and leaves the dining room, heading to Chloe's room. She flies into her mistress's room, bringing not just happy news, but a delicious snack that Chloe could rarely afford. Blair carefully places the hard-won delicacy on the dish and wishes her mistress a bon appetit. While Chloe tries the chicken, Blair thinks it would be nice to try bringing some soup here, but her owner doesn't think that's possible. Our heroine does not let up and says that if she had some kind of vessel and not just an apron pocket, she could easily cope. Without taking her eyes off the food, Chloe condescendingly replies that there is no point in discussing it. Even if Blair brings it, it will be cold, with lumps of cooled fat and tasteless. Having accepted this answer as the final decision on the issue of stealing the soup, Blair falls silent, peering at the young girl eating meat opposite her. 2 years have already passed since our heroine carries food for Chloe, and all because the evil and childish people from the servants did not give the girl normal food. Blair is gutted just by the thought of how it was possible to give so little not just to a noble lady, but also to a teenager who has yet to grow up. Although the young housewife refused at first, they now dine together with food stolen from the dining room because Chloe does not like to dine alone. To her question whether Blair herself ate the chicken, our heroine replies that she, of course, could not resist and ate one leg along the way. But this is a lie. Chloe moves the plate towards the maid with her slender fingers, informing her that she no longer wants to eat, and Blair herself can take the rest. Despite stubborn resistance, the heroine forces Chloe to eat at least one more piece, thus dividing the remaining chicken. Looking at her mistress, she thinks that in this world it is impossible for a maid and a noble lady to dine at the same table. But nevertheless, right now the opposite was happening here. In her memoirs, Blair is transported to the very beginning of their acquaintance, when, after an interview, she was hired at the mansion of the Chloe family, the Bicester family, and almost immediately became assigned to hard work. On her first day of work, she saw in one of the windows the silhouette of a girl looking out over the estate. Blair's eyes widened in surprise when she recognized in the girl a familiar image that had appeared more than once in a novel she had read in another world. It was Chloe herself, who was as thin as a cane, and her shoulders seemed fragile as glass, and her beautiful scarlet eyes looked lifelessly into the distance. Unable to take her eyes off the emaciated girl, Blair remembered what exactly was the reason for such a terrible appearance of the main character of the novel. The Duke of Bicester brought Chloe as a very little girl from distant lands, doing this out of a sense of duty to her. He thought he was fulfilling his parental responsibilities by feeding, clothing, and sheltering him, regardless of what Chloe herself wanted or asked for. Therefore, he never stood up for his daughter, although he knew very well that his wife, the Duchess, abused the girl as much as her imagination and the law allowed. Such an attempt to distance himself from the torment of his child, hiding behind such words as duty and obligation, infuriates the angry Blair. Because if he thinks so about his daughter, he should not have allowed her to be born. Blair's rage is unstoppable, and she vehemently opposes the very idea of an extramarital affair, especially without reliable contraception. And if Bister wanted to move his daughter to his family estate, then he should have tried and done everything possible for the sake of the child, and not turned a blind eye to the heroine's bullying. But as you know, Chloe's path is already predetermined. She will grow up and become a strong personality. The attitude towards her will change after discovering her gift of prediction, which she cannot see, but can show to others. The father will finally appear normally in the girl's life and show remorse for his behavior, not leaving her in the future. Her elder brother, the future Duke, who had previously completely ignored his sister, will begin to worship her so much that he will be ready to kiss her feet. And then, according to the plot of the novel, a love fork occurs in Chloe's life, which can again completely change her life. She will meet 3 important male characters, each with their own personalities and abilities, and each of them could become her love interest. The first, Crown Prince Hyde, the future ruler of the country, is assertive and brave. The second, Marquis Geron, was a master swordsman, one of the most famous swordsmen on the continent. And the third, the most mysterious of them, the sage from the Magic Tower, Days. But as interesting and deep characters as they were, the only figure Blair had to support was Chloe herself, who didn't even look at the family clinging to her because of the gift. And although the novel was entertaining, Lily herself, before her transition to this world, would not have wanted to be here, but it turned out what happened. The novel became a reality, and Blair, who found herself here, could not help but feel sorry for young Chloe, even though she knew that a happy future awaited her. Unable to contain herself like anyone else in her position, Blair directs her anger towards the people around Chloe at the weeds in the grass. Her diligent work is noticed by the manager, the strict and experienced housekeeper, Madame Dear, who tells the girl to follow her to her office to receive new tasks. This greatly improves Blair's mood, who is just glad to stop weeding, especially since she managed to impress the manager on her first day. But before going after Madame Dear, our heroine turns sharply to take another look at young Chloe. But the girl left, and the window was already closed with no way to look into it. So, for the first time, Blair was able to see the main character of her favorite novel in reality, realizing what a terrible nightmare she was living in. Evening comes, and the servants finally go to their rooms to relax and have a good rest before another productive day. Blair was very tired after a day of work, and this fatigue weighs heavily on her shoulders. And the saddest thing is that she was not able to see Chloe again. While she is stretching to relax her aching muscles, one of the maids, a young red-haired girl, runs up to her to introduce herself. Her name is Misa. She asks Blair's name and wonders if she used to work as a maid, which only causes irritation in our heroine. Her questions are increasingly reminiscent of an interrogation, and moreover, Blair has the feeling that she will be left with the most difficult work, as the newest and most inexperienced. However, Misa just wants to warn her that after working in a separate building of the estate, it is difficult to get a job anywhere, and besides, the girl should avoid the doll. Blair doesn't understand what they're talking about and asks her new friend if she means some kind of ghost or some other scary story. But she is overcome with a real surge of horror when she hears that under the doll the local maids call Chloe, the illegitimate daughter of the Duke. Holding back herself, Blair hears Misa continue to tell her that the Duke's people hate Chloe, and those who try to meet her halfway get into big trouble. Our heroine cannot believe that this is really happening, and that a child can be treated so cruelly, and no one cares. Blair understands Misa. She clearly said all this with the best intentions so that the newcomer would not make mistakes and ruin her life. But what about Chloe herself? Because she did not deserve such an attitude towards herself. Returning to her room, the girl continues to reason. The next morning, Blair comes to the manager and decisively announces that she wants to be Chloe's personal maid, because right now, she does not have her own maid. This is the girl's own desire, which she tells Madame Dear, but she cannot believe her ears, and asks several times whether Blair is really ready for this. She is already in the world of the novel enough to believe in its reality, which is why the girl cannot stand aside and watch Chloe being bullied. Seeing the girl's persistence, Madame has no choice but to allow her, although she does not give up trying to convince Blair, telling her that Chloe will not be happy with her. To which our heroine boldly declares that they will look at this, and Madame is even a little surprised by such impudence, but stands her ground and asks her for the last time if Blair is sure. There is no need for this, says ours. She is ready for all the hardships that may arise during work. Madame finds herself fighting against a wall and finally announces that Blair will be working as Chloe's personal maid starting today. 10 minutes later, dressed in a fresh dress, our heroine stands at the massive wooden door leading to the chambers of her new mistress, Chloe. Her heart was beating like a bird in a cage when she knocked on the door, behind which was hiding the hostess familiar in the novel, but unfamiliar in this world. But in response, she heard only silence, which seemed stranger to her than Chloe's possible angry voice. She begins to worry that the new mistress may not be there, or that something has happened to her. And trying to hear at least some sound from inside, Blair presses against the door. Having no more patience, she turns the door handle, which opens without difficulty. The maid, suspecting nothing, enters her mistress's room to check what is happening. But then a pillow thrown from the bed flies into her, which Blair does not have time to dodge. While Blair scratches her bruised nose from a flying pillow, Chloe, hiding under the blanket, orders her to get out. But this does not stop our heroine, and she anxiously looks around her new mistress's room, and it seems to her that this space has seen better days. She is shocked that a young girl can live in a room full of garbage and dust. Clearly no one has cleaned it for a very long time. Realizing that there is no point in making Chloe angry any longer, Blair carefully informs the young lady that today she would just like to greet the new owner, so she is already leaving. Turning around, our heroine sees almost the entire room, dirty and unkempt, and decides that tomorrow it will finally be put in order. This week, Blair spends most of her time in the small laundry room, kneading, twisting, and drying laundry from around the estate. She pauses for a moment, trying to catch her breath, thinking that she expected this development of events, but still she cannot hide her disappointment in those around her. They dumped all the hard work on her shoulders, and immediately after she became Chloe's maid, as if in retaliation for the fact that she signed up to be one in the first place. Without finishing the work, she will not receive food, and if she refuses, according to the other maids, she will violate Madame Dear's orders, and all this greatly upsets her. But it doesn't hurt as much as the relationship with Chloe, whose heart seems to be made of ice. This girl seems so unapproachable. After several days of grueling work, she didn't even glance at Blair as she cleaned up, constantly continuing to look at the view from the window. But in her heart, our heroine understands that this is just a pretense, because she has read the novel and knows how its main character really feels. Sniffling, she decides to try to see Chloe tomorrow during lunch, no matter what, and then continues her difficult work. Another memorable episode for Blair was the first meal she brought for Chloe, namely its terrible state, a piece of stale bread and spoiled yogurt. While she is thinking that it would be nice to throw out this inedible food and bring something fresh, Chloe herself meets her, which scares Blair. Passing by, the young housewife indifferently announces that she will not eat, after which she slams the door to her room behind her. However, Blair herself, knowing full well what this abnormal dinner looks like, would also refuse. But the problem is that Chloe's body still needs to grow. Therefore, nothing better comes to our heroine's head than to start stealing normal, fresh food for her young mistress. Having stolen some food for the first time, she flies into Chloe's room with a most contented look, which slightly scares the girl, who is accustomed to silence. While the young lady tries to argue that she won't do anything, Blair, not listening to her words, dumps fresh boiled eggs and fragrant buns on the table and presents them to Chloe with a wide smile. Our heroine literally blossoms while she happily tells her mistress about how she stole these products from lunch. Listening to her cheerful story, Chloe does not say a word, being in slight bewilderment, not understanding why her maid did such a thing. Finally, having listened to the girl to the end, she breaks her silence, asking Blair if she herself took this as food, but the maid does not understand her question. Moreover, she perceives this question as if Chloe, despite all her coldness in communication, began to show a kind of concern for Blair, and answers that she ate. Her dreams of caring Chloe are shattered by cold reality, after she continues to contemptuously ask whether Blair really wants the lady to eat the same food as the maid. But nevertheless, our heroine does not give up hope of properly feeding her mistress and begins to move her towards food, to which she reacts with extreme reluctance. But Blair cannot be stopped. She holds out a fresh bun, still a little warm, to Chloe's face, and offers to finally stop grumbling and eat at least a little. But Chloe doesn't move, like a frozen statue, and continues to look at Blair with a glare of hatred. And then our heroine decides to use another method. She asks how old Chloe is, and doubts that she is at least 16 years old, after which she offers to feed her like a child, and this has its effect. Chloe grabs the bun from Blair's hands, and Blair catches herself thinking that maybe the lady herself doesn't like it, but she needs to eat to improve her health. Our heroine rejoices at her completed mission, while Chloe finally digs into the fresh baked goods brought by the maid. While the young lady is finishing her lunch, Blair responsibly states that next time she will bring something better for Chloe, but for now she can eat this. To this, Chloe, rising from the table, dryly replies that there will be no next time, and if Blair brings food again, she will throw it away. And to this our heroine has to justify herself that she wanted the best. Disappointed in the behavior of her obstinate mistress, Blair sadly says that she is very thin, after which Chloe stops in place. Blair realizes what a mistake she has now made, accusing the young lady of being thin because, as a simple servant, she has no right to even talk about it without permission. Chloe's eloquent, icy gaze, ready to swat her like a fly, only confirms her fears, which means that the intensity needs to be lowered. Our heroine has no choice but to try not to piss off the lady anymore, and she hastily retreats, hastily apologizing. Having run out of the chambers, Blair pauses against the wall, realizing that what happened now is a failure, and now she will have to start over. Today, all that remains is to accept her stupidity, she thinks, and go to rest, and somehow tomorrow everything will get better. The next morning, the weather turned out great, giving Chloe a chance to walk around the garden and Blair to apologize to her for yesterday's incident. And, as an apology, she plans to present Chloe with a big red apple and at the same time feed her with it, thus killing two birds with one stone. Jumping around the corner, she runs up to her mistress, scaring her a little, after which Chloe asks Blair why she came again. Just as our heroine holds out an apple asking her to accept it, Chloe walks by, replying that she won't eat it. And only an apology from Blair's lips stops the icy mistress, who previously did not even want to see her careless maid. Blair admits that she should have offered food from the beginning, not because Chloe was thin, but because she was hungry and needed help. Even if she didn't want to accept an apology, she can at least accept this apple, the girl says, to which Chloe replies that she sees some kind of cruel joke in it. Blair agrees that it may seem that way, but in reality she only sincerely wants to help Chloe, because what should she do when she could faint at any moment? After thinking a little, Chloe gives up and finally accepts the apple from the maid, realizing that she does not wish her harm and is not the Duchess's man. Amused by this, Blair a little impatiently asks her if Chloe did it out of pity, to which she receives a negative answer. She says that she is not in a position to be able to feel sorry for anyone, including our heroine. This may be true, Blair agrees, but she is still immensely glad that Chloe found the strength to do this, which she tells her. She peers into the face of her maid, but now, in addition to her typical icy gaze, there is also a hint of embarrassment in her eyes. A wide smile grows on Blair's face. She says that without regret, she would not have been forgiven. Chloe turns away and replies that it sounded as if Blair had lost a stone in her heart, but nevertheless, Chloe did not accept her apology. And besides, the young lady does not understand why our heroine continues to follow her, thus trying to change the topic, but receives the answer that Blair is still her personal maid. There is an awkward pause between the two, during which our heroine realizes that Chloe apparently did not remember that she now even has a maid. This fact drives Blair to despair, because she greeted Chloe on the first day, introduced herself according to all the rules, and even tried to get closer to her all these days. Chloe, not intending to wait for Blair, quickly runs away from the blooming garden, shouting to her maid not to follow her, and so their conversation ends. A week after Blair became Chloe's personal maid, the young lady's stepmother summoned her for a private conversation. Recalling the thread of the story's narrative, our heroine remembers that the Duchess was rumored to be accused of killing Chloe's mother, and that it was she who bullied Chloe herself, but was also very beautiful. Peering intently at Blair's young face, the Duchess finally begins a conversation, asking if she is the maid who became close to Chloe. As she says this, Blair wonders how familiar Chloe's stepmother is with her stepdaughter's life, because she doesn't know that she has no other personal servants, and there's no sign of rapprochement here. As kindly and caringly as possible, the Duchess asks if it is difficult for her to work in the separate building where Chloe lives. To which Blair herself just as sweetly replies that it's not hard for her at all, realizing in her head that if she says otherwise, she'll be fired on the spot. Twitching a little, like a hunter who has missed his prey from a trap, the Duchess, still smiling, nods to her answer. But this is not her last trump card, she thinks, calling another maid who quickly brings her a packed envelope, which our heroine is not expecting. This envelope contains Blair's dossier, from which the Duchess reads it becomes known that she is 18 years old, and her family lost its social status, after which the girl had to become a maid. In addition, Blair also understands that the Duchess knows everything about her parents, as well as her two younger brothers, and such a layer of information about only the maid Chloe worries our heroine. Finishing reading the dossier, the Duchess, as if by chance, points out that the girl is already at the age when it is time to think about marriage and children, which takes Blair by surprise. "But there can't be a wedding without a dowry," continues the Duke's wife, "and a suitable spouse needs to be found. And in this she has experience and capabilities, stunning Blair with this, who understands that everything was decided for her. And now, having said all this, the Duchess is waiting for the correct answer to the question she asked a few minutes ago." Without any intention, Blair asks again what question they asked her, why the Duchess, because of such stupidity of the maid, even broke her fan in her hands. Trying her best to restrain herself not to show emotions, the mistress repeats whether it is difficult for our heroine to work in a separate building where Chloe lives. She sees that Blair still doesn't have an answer and is now looking for an alternative option to get what she wants from her. Realizing that it is difficult for the girl to give an answer, because after all we are talking about Chloe, she wants to offer our heroine a new job related to the new lady. This change in conversation surprises Blair a little. She is interested in finding out from the Duchess what they can offer her that almost gets her fired at first. And she tells her that she needs to get as close as possible to Chloe and then tell her about everything that she does and thinks about. Shocked by this proposal, Blair continues to sit in her seat, contemplating the words the Duchess had just spoken to her. She carefully, so as not to arouse suspicion, clarifies whether she means constant surveillance of the young lady, to which the Duchess brushes it off. She is just curious how her stepdaughter is doing, nothing more, because despite the fact that they are not blood relatives, Chloe is like a daughter to her. In addition to her words, she places a large purse full of gold coins on the table, which makes Blair, who just wanted to refuse, think twice. When the Duchess took this wallet to give it personally to Blair, she noticed that there was so much money in it that even for a strong woman, it was quite heavy. Unable to resist, our heroine accepts money from the Duchess, who called it a reward for hard work around the house, and that's how their conversation ended. An hour later, Blair was already at Chloe's bedside and honestly told her that the Duchess had called her to her place and asked her to start spying on the young lady. Chloe, to put it mildly, was not happy about this fact and asked Blair if she was telling the truth. And besides this, our heroine adds that she was offered a large sum of money for this, enough to live better than the rest of the servants. To Chloe's next question, whether she took this money from her stepmother, Blair answers without a drop of shame that she took it without the slightest twinge of conscience. Then Chloe, just as shamelessly as her maid, extends her thin, fragile hand, ordering the purse to be given to her right now. Handing over a heavy, clinking purse full of gold coins to her mistress, Blair catches herself thinking that the young lady is behaving like a seasoned bandit. Having received the money in her hands, Chloe finally smiles for the first time in our heroine's memory, albeit not without a bit of gloating. But Blair is happy with such a smile. However, a little later, Blair remembers another trait of Chloe, namely, that she secretly reads books at night, since she is closely watched during the day, and this habit will help her in the future. Previously, our heroine thought that it would be better if she did not show that she knew about it, but now she is not so sure. Now, if you think about it, she continues, she can help, because Chloe, unlike her, cannot leave the mansion. And if so, then Blair, who is sometimes able to walk outside the estate, can secretly carry these books, which is what she is going to do. She remembers that she did not plan this minor break from work, and now, since the opportunity has arisen, she is carrying books in her hands that she wants to share with the young lady. Before the trip, Blair specially stopped by to see her, telling her that she had the opportunity to leave for a while and would do it this afternoon. Hearing only silence in response, she turns to leave the room, thinking to herself that this is exactly the reaction she expected from her mistress. As soon as she approaches the door, Chloe calls her over, after which our heroine turns around sharply, not expecting any interest from Chloe. She throws her a wallet full of gold coins, the one that the Duchess gave to Blair as payment for surveillance. Touched by this act, Blair thanks the girl and says that she will spend the money wisely, but this time Chloe really doesn't care. In her mind, Blair convinces herself that Chloe was just pretending she didn't care until our heroine said she was leaving and gave her the money back because she began to trust her more. Wandering through the streets of the city and thinking about the kind hostess, she comes across an extremely pleasant smell of fried meat emanating nearby. This is not just charcoal grilled meat, but shish kebab, juicy and tasty with a golden crust and pieces of vegetables soaked in meat juice. Blair didn't even have time to come to her senses before she began gobbling up piece after piece. Without stopping, even the cook noticed such a strong appetite. Our heroine asks to wrap several portions with her in order to bring them to Chloe, because she has not eaten anything like this since the Duke brought her to his estate. She comes to the kitchen, a place where exquisite dishes were prepared for rich owners and their guests, with modern furniture and a stove for that time. Timidly opening the door, she checks with her voice to see if any of the late cooks or their assistants are there. After making sure no one is watching her, she puts the basket of groceries in a hidden corner so she can cook Chloe a delicious dinner later. Satisfied with her progress, she returns back to the young lady's room to tell her the good news. But Chloe, with her usual sternness, carefully examined her maid and asked what was wrong with her clothes. They were dirty. Our heroine examines the dress and, to her horror, finds a large stain of fat on it, probably left in the process of eating fried meat. Chloe casually remarks that Blair simply ate her fill of barbecue and came back, and the latter notes that these words are more suitable for a bandit than for a young lady. But then a question creeps into her head. She doesn't understand how Chloe even knew that Blair was eating kebab, but she's not destined to find out the answer to her question, since Chloe is going to drive her out of the room. But Blair is not here to just serve. She came for other purposes. Two thick books appear in her hand, which she thinks might interest Chloe. When Chloe herself asks what all this means, the girl replies that she knows about the mistress's nightly readings, and an awkward pause arises between them for several moments. While the gaze of the Duke's young daughter melts our heroine, Blair brushes off that she may have been followed, but a couple of new books won't hurt. This is not the answer that Chloe would like to hear. More and more disbelief is read in her eyes, after which she asks Blair the question of who she really is. For a moment, the maid thinks about how best to answer, because she doesn't want to admit to coming from another world. Therefore, she laughs it off and simply says that she is only Mistress Chloe's personal maid and no one else. This answer seemed to calm the young lady, and she, turning in the other direction, orders her to leave the books and leave. But Blair still has one more proposal for the lady. She, a little embarrassedly, asks Chloe to go with her to the kitchen in the mansion for a delicious dinner, which is why the girl even gets up a little from the bed in surprise. And when, instead of the usual cold refusal, Chloe dryly agrees, Blair seemed to be struck by lightning from such an unexpected step forward, because she did not think that Chloe would agree so easily. Our heroine is incredibly touched by this turn of events, because now she will be able to become even closer to the Duke's daughter and, perhaps, give her a pleasant memory. She extends her hand, suggesting they go immediately to keep the food fresh. Chloe at first does not like the fact that Blair is reaching out to her, but she only encourages the lady to do this, without removing the sweet smile from her face. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Chloe looks at her caring maid's hand, her usual sternness giving way to hesitation. But finally overpowering herself, she pulls her thin fingers, weakened by painful thinness, into Blair's large and warm hand. Our heroine is melting with cuteness on the spot, while Chloe stands and waits for her to finally be taken out for a tasty meal. They walked out into a bright and elegant corridor, decorated in a classic style, filled with the latest fashion lamps and flowers. The servants who were guarding the entrance to Chloe's room, whispering, began to run away when they saw the door opening. The girls leaving the room only have time to see a piece of the black dress of one of them running away down the corridor. Blair wonders if the only reason they ran away now is because Chloe is with her, and any other time they would have given her more work. But now at least the path to the cafeteria is open. Having reached the dining room, our heroine leaves the lady at one of the tables, and she goes to the kitchen to start cooking. She sits down at the same food cabinet to make some great dish out of it. She was stunned by what she saw, and her face showed a mixture of amazement, fear, and disappointment. The food that Blair bought was once fresh and delicious, but now it has turned into a pile of disgusting garbage. Could it be that they were other maids? Flashes through her head, but she cannot understand their motives because normal people are not able to do such a thing. While Blair sits by the battered groceries, remaining in shock, Chloe approaches her from behind, asking what went wrong. Our heroine turns around and fear is written all over her. This situation breaks her feelings. All she wanted was to cook normal food for Chloe, not the kind given to her on the orders of the Duchess or stolen from Blair's own kitchen, but something warm and pleasant. But everything turned out for the worst, and now her dreams of giving Chloe a warm memory turned into a handful of crushed food. In a panic, she tries to gather these remains into a pile so that Chloe cannot see them, but nothing works. And so the depressed Blair asks for forgiveness in a trembling voice. The young lady sits down and carefully takes her hand so that it doesn't get dirty, and asks why exactly she wants to be forgiven. Unable to hold back her tears, Blair explains that she just wanted to thank her for the fact that Chloe began to open up to her a little, despite her dislike of others. But everything went wrong. Everything that our heroine had experienced before seemed like just a heavy burden of bullying, but it was too much. And all this only because she stood up for a little girl, lonely and persecuted. Chloe, not knowing how to react, does not understand why Blair is crying so much, and her face, perhaps for the first time, shows concern for someone. Emotions overwhelm Blair, and she instinctively leans against her mistress's shoulder, exploding into a girlish cry. Chloe blushes. No one has ever cried on her shoulder before, and she has no choice but to hug the crying maid. Blair felt those awkward hugs on her back, and besides them, weak and awkward, but sincere pats on the back. This made the tears flow even more, because as Blair thought, it was she who should have consoled Chloe, who had been going through this throughout her entire childhood, and not the other way around. Sometime later, returning to Chloe's room and eating the already cooled kebab together, our heroine again asks for forgiveness. But the young mistress has had enough of apologizing, and she warns Blair that if she keeps apologizing, she will simply kick her out. And besides, Chloe wants to know what her maid will do with that stain from tears that she herself left on her shoulder, to which Blair replies that she can wash it now. After these words, a dozen seconds pass while both girls look at each other, as if expecting some kind of command from the other. Finally, Blair conveys to her mistress that if she wants a washed dress, it would be a good idea to take it off first. Chloe, of course, expected different things, but this proposal was clearly not what she could have imagined. Her eyes widen from this. She runs almost to the corner of the room, not understanding why Blair is doing this, and Blair, in turn, is amazed at her mistress's reaction, but explains that she cannot wash clothes while Chloe is in it. She offers her help in undressing, but the young lady runs away from such help like fire, despite Blair's assurances that she is still a personal maid. Realizing that she cannot get rid of the annoying girl, Chloe turns around to drive her away. But at the last moment, she comes up with an option that suits her, pointing her finger at the toilet. Blair is scared, thinking that as a punishment for her intrusiveness, she will now be locked in the toilet until Chloe gets tired of it. Not wanting such an outcome, she begins to assure that she is very capable and can help undress in a second. In desperation, she asks not to close her down or kick her out, although in her heart she reproaches herself for this crying and pleas. Chloe dissuades Blair from this, explaining that she will not lock her up and kick her out. She simply does not want, speaking about this a little blushing, for the maid to see her naked. Realizing how stupid she probably looked right now, Blair slaps her hands and simply backs away towards the bathroom door. In such a state of inhibition from awkwardness, she slowly walks out the door without taking her eyes off her young mistress. From behind the door, she tells Chloe as encouragingly as possible to change as much as she likes while she waits, to which she receives in response an order not to talk nonsense and to close the door on the other side. More than 10 days have passed since their conversation with the Duchess, and in general, nothing has changed for our heroine, only more work has been added. And it became more because other maids shamelessly shifted their share onto Blair's shoulders, waiting for her at Chloe's door. But this time, they were guarding her in a different place, whispering behind her back. While she was carrying clothes to be washed, one of the girls, without warning, pushed our heroine in the back right in front of the stairs. Unable to maintain her balance after such a push, Blair screams and then falls down the stairs straight to the first floor of the mansion. Her ankle is injured, which will make it difficult for her to walk, and all because of the servants, who, in addition to psychological attacks, have turned to active actions. Trying to ignore the pain, Blair steels herself to stand and continue on her way to the laundry room. At the same time, her ankle is most likely sprained, which causes her maximum discomfort. She, limping slightly, continues to walk between the shocked maids, who thought that she could be intimidated in this way. This will not happen, Blair declares in her thoughts, and no matter what happens, she will be with Chloe to the end and someday will accompany her to the ball. Continuing to hobble towards the laundry, she catches herself thinking that she hasn't seen her young mistress all day, and it would be nice to check on her. Halfway to the laundry, her path is blocked by 2 more maids, who were also waiting for her arrival here, in this corridor. At their feet stands an ordinary wooden bucket filled with water, and they clearly saved it for our heroine, but not to help with cleaning the laundry. Blair understands their intentions, but cannot believe that they would dare to commit such open aggression. As she passes the girls, she hears one of them whispering to the other to act, after which she feels that she has been tripped up. Unable to dodge, she falls to the floor with a crash, feeling almost all the bruises from her fall down the stairs. In Blair's eyes, you can see the reflection of these two evil hooligans, intending to pour the entire bucket on her for the sake of bullying. The girl, hearing the splash of pouring water, closes her eyes, resigning herself to the fact that she won't be able to dodge, and just waits for it all to end. However, after a few seconds, she opens them back, finding herself completely dry. Looking up, she realizes that she was covered from imminent bullying and is shocked to realize who did it. Chloe stands in front of her with water falling from her night pajamas in fast streams, and in some places even drops, while the young lady herself clears her throat. She doesn't understand where Blair disappeared to all day, and then asks why she's still sitting on the floor. "Blair Thorpe, get up," she says, her voice cold as cold water continues to drip down her ashen hair. Our heroine, awkwardly getting up due to the feeling of pain, blushes a little, because Chloe called her by name for the first time, albeit not in the most pleasant circumstances. Chloe calls the two maids who doused her with water and orders them to get out of her sight as quickly as possible, and they immediately obey because they can be severely punished for what they did. She follows them with her icy gaze while they, shining their heels, try to get as far as possible from the Duke's young daughter. While our heroine is trying to find better words to thank her savior in the form of Chloe, she interrupts with a rude expression, saying that she is annoyed by Blair's behavior. Turning around, she loudly declares that the girl should not tolerate bullying and allow such vile bullying to happen to her. But Blair is not up to that. She comes up to Chloe and says that she is all wet, and also silently notes that the lady's lips are also blue from the cold, while she herself simply wet the hem of her dress. Chloe perceives her alarmed expression as another attempt to burst into tears out of the blue, and immediately warns that if that happens, she will leave her right here. But Blair says right away that she won't cry, she just wants to thank her mistress for interceding, and wants to ask if she's worried about her. For a second, they both freeze while our heroine waits for at least some reaction from the hostess, and Chloe thinks about how she should react to this. The last excess moisture falls from the curls of a young girl, but cold beyond her years, while she tries to express at least something on her face or voice. Not finding anything suitable from her emotions, Chloe turns sharply and walks away, into the bath to warm up in the warm water, at the same time telling Blair not to follow her. The girl does not listen to her and continues to hobble, following her as best she can. She cannot escape the thought that Chloe could catch a cold and get sick from such cold water, especially with her fragile, weak health. But she only forcefully slams the door behind her, leaving our heroine in the corridor completely alone. She has no choice but to sit by the door and wait until the mistress calms down, finishes her business in the bathroom, and leaves, thinking that in this world it is unacceptable for a lady to cover a maid with herself. From behind the door, Chloe's voice is heard, telling her maid that she should transfer to the main building and not suffer, because it is impossible to help her. You can only make it worse for yourself. So Blair understands that her mistress knows what the real reason for such strong hatred from the rest of the servants is, but she immediately tells herself that it is not Chloe's fault. And while Chloe swears out loud at Blair for so recklessly ruining her life on her, our heroine waits a little and reminds her of her presence. Coming out of the bathroom, the young lady admits that she cannot do anything about this chaos, and she cannot even command the servants, let alone change personnel. Nevertheless, Blair says with a smile, she drove away these vile hooligans incomparably, and she herself could not have done it, and even if they could not be punished now, someone else will definitely do it. She sided with Blair not for profit, but in order to give the main character of her favorite novel some warm memories so that her childhood would not be filled only with darkness. Chloe doesn't understand where the girl has so much optimism and how she can even be calm in such a life situation. She says that in the big world, there are much more unfair things, and therefore what is happening to her is not so offensive because there are people who suffer more. Hearing the answer, Chloe walks by and says that she will send the stupid maid somewhere away from her, which scares Blair. Unable to get up and follow the hostess, our heroine grabs her ankle in an attempt to stop her. Chloe, no matter how hard she tried, could not have foreseen such an event, and therefore she freezes in shock, not even trying to escape at first. Blair, taking advantage of the moment, crawls up to her, and without letting go of her leg, says in a pitiful voice that she will have nowhere to go if Chloe kicks her out. With the face of a suffering kitten, she asks the owner if she really won't feel sorry for her when Blair ends up on the street. Confused, Chloe has to make excuses, which may be a pity, but she immediately puts her mind in order and demands that her leg be released immediately. Gathering all the pity that she could possibly muster, Blair does not back down, and then Chloe asks the question of who actually sent the girl to her as a personal maid. A joyful, slightly shabby Blair replies that it was her personal choice, although at the time she did not think that they would try to kick her out, but nevertheless, she sincerely wants to stay close to Chloe. The young lady sighs, realizing that there is no escape from this girl, and nods quietly. Blair's joy knows no bounds. She, like a little child, jumps up despite her previous injuries. Laughing loudly and kindly, she asks if Chloe promises to stay with her forever. This is very important to her. Looking at her unlucky maid, Chloe calmly says that she cannot promise her forever, and this word, forever, cannot be spoken with such dexterity. She turns her back to Blair again, which she takes as a good sign, which means she can go to her room with a sense of accomplishment. While she is rising, Chloe manages to properly examine the state of her maid, and this state does not suit her at all. She asks why she is limping badly, and there are bruises on her face, after which she clarifies whether this was done by the same servants who had previously doused her with water. Our heroine has to lie a little so that Chloe doesn't blame herself, and in her version she just fell, but you can't tell from her swollen and red ankle. But such an elementary lie does not pass, and Chloe continues to glare at the shabby maid, who cannot add anything special to her words. Therefore, the young lady decides to take matters into her own hands, and with a wave of her thin finger, she directs the surprised Blair to a chair by the open window, while our heroine stupidly invites Chloe herself to sit there, not understanding what they want from her. The gray-haired girl is already regretting her decision to leave Blair around. Finally realizing, the girl sits down on a chair with optimism so that no one will be offended at her anymore. Although, after a moment, she wonders if it was worth going through with it, as Chloe approaches her, after which she comes from a state of disbelief into complete shock when her young mistress kneels down and begins to feel her swollen ankle. But Chloe, like an experienced doctor, tells Blair to sit quietly, keep her back straight, and head up while she continues to examine the injured girl. Over the course of time, Blair's leg had already turned very red and looked as if it were not dislocated, but broken. Having sufficiently examined the bruise, Chloe pulls her finger into her mouth in order to get the material she needs now. Remaining in the dark, Blair tries to stop the mistress, but to no avail. Chloe takes her thin, pale finger out of her mouth, from which little by little scarlet blood comes out, which also remains on her lips. Horrified, Blair points out the obvious, that Lady Chloe is bleeding, which is not what she remembered the main character of her favorite novel for. And she, in turn, applies blood to our heroine's leg, but not randomly, but in the form of a special magic rune which begins to glow a little. This seal, which Chloe applied, removes not only the red swelling, but also severe pain. But all this became possible only with the help of black magic. Blair screams in horror. She can't believe that Chloe not only did it, but also performed the forbidden ritual so casually, to which she calmly reacts, not understanding what's wrong with it. The young daughter of the Duke gets up and moves away from the frightened maid, only noticing that she is making too much noise, and this may attract unwanted listeners. This changes the situation radically for Blair, because she always thought that she knew absolutely everything about Chloe, but black magic became something new, and there was not a word about it in the novel, which means that the world is changing beyond recognition. However, Chloe says that she only relieved the pain, but to really get her leg in order, you should visit a real doctor and not experiment. When Blair asks who the experiments were carried out on, Chloe, standing like a mad scientist, declares in a frightening voice that she was an experimental subject. Or rather, on Blair herself, she says in an even darker tone, and her eyes begin to glow in bloody tones. Blair herself, after listening to the whole terrible speech, found herself on the verge of a heart attack, screaming in horror. Even though she is scared to death, she still sees that Chloe is just laughing at her in this way, albeit in such a creepy way. Without holding back a smile, the young lady invites the maid to leave before they turn her into an experimental mouse and conduct new experiments. Even though it was a simple attempt to shoo Blair away, it was quite effective, as she easily ran away. Fortunately, her ankle no longer hurt, although this scared her a little. But just before leaving, she hears Chloe's voice asking for a favor, which she will tell about when Blair herself gets better. Having survived this emotional swing, our heroine leaves, promising to fulfill any request of her mistress, and goes to rest. As she closes the door, she quietly says how grateful she is for Chloe's help today. A few days later, during which Blair's leg healed quite quickly, at the request of her owner, our heroine was able to go out into the city again. Even though it is difficult for the girl to understand Chloe's inscriptions, she understands that being locked up made it difficult for her to get an education. And if you take this into account, then everything is not so bad. As far as Blair knew, Chloe had never left the Duke's estate, so it was surprising that she was able to draw such a detailed map of the city from her memories. After such things, the girl no longer knows whether she can again trust the original story of the novel, or whether there is something else that she does not yet know about. Having reached the right place, she follows the instructions, knocking a small melody on the door in order to be able to enter the magician's shop, because Chloe's request was one ingredient for practicing magic. While she patiently waits for an answer, Blair manages to think that here, as in any fantasy, everything is very confusing for warlocks. And just as she wanted to leave, a stranger in a white cloak appeared next to her, asking what she needed in such a place. From such an unexpected appearance of our heroine, the heart skips a beat, and thoughts begin to flutter wildly about who this is, maybe the warlock himself. Following him, Blair realizes that she came correctly from the map, but is not sure whether it would be correct to follow the stranger deeper into the building. Right before her eyes, the entire room is filled with golden light, changing the situation in a matter of seconds, striking the girl. She is surprised how the empty room is filled with furniture and lamps, the smell of various dishes, and even the voices of many people. Only now it became clear that all this time there had been a lot of people here, but they were hiding here with the help of magic, but why is not clear. One of the men sitting there asks the arriving stranger in white who this child is, pointing to Blair, whom he brought with him, and addresses him as Damon. He casually responds to this appeal, removing his hood, saying that he simply met the girl at the entrance. This becomes a real revelation for our heroine, because this man, Damon, had one of the most important roles in the original novel. Being the sage of the Magic Tower, he claims to be the future head of this very tower, and therefore a place next to the Emperor. The mysterious handsome man, in the main story, often flirted with Chloe after she came out. And above all, this blue-haired sage was one of the main contenders for the heart of the young lady, the main character of the novel. And now, he is genuinely interested in what a girl like Blair is looking for in a place like this, and how she even found this place. But she does not answer his question, remembering that at the very first meeting, Damon will kiss Chloe on the cheek, but now they also have something in common in black magic, which our heroine did not even suspect. In the novel, when they first met, a special connection flashed between them. Our heroine continues to think, and now it becomes clear why. Damon himself has a dark and mysterious image, but nevertheless, according to Blair, he is still handsome, although not as good as Chloe. Returning from her thoughts, she shows the magician Chloe's drawing, explaining that she needs this ingredient for her mistress, and for the sake of it, she came here. Damon agrees to help and offers to follow him further, which the girl does. Finally, they descend into the basement, slightly shrouded in twilight, and this place seems extremely suspicious to Blair from the very beginning. Having followed the magician through a heavy wooden door, the girl first looks around. In this room, she is surrounded by various shaped cones and molds filled with multicolored liquids and powders. She's surprised by the large number of different potions, to which Damon explains that this is their main storage facility, and it takes him a little less than a minute to find the right one. Having found the potion even in less time, the magician hands it to Blair, saying that this is exactly what he and the owner are looking for in his store. Having handed it over to the girl, he wonders if Blair herself knows what it is for, to which she gives him a negative answer. For her, his facial expression becomes no less suspicious than the contents of this very bottle of potion. Damon invites her to try and find out, but Blair flatly refuses the invitation to drink potions in a stranger's house and offers to pay in order to leave. But the magician just smiles and says that he doesn't need money because he saw something interesting in her, and that's what he will accept for his payment. Returning home, Blair, without holding back the details, tells the young lady about everything that happened and presents the very bottle that Damon gave her. Chloe is not satisfied with the retelling, and she demands that the maid repeat everything again from the very beginning, and she does not understand what could have upset the mistress. Blair recounts how she followed the map and performed the ritual, after which a stranger appeared next to her. He had dark blue hair and purple eyes and was cute and kind, even sharing the potion for free. In another world, while still a completely different girl, our heroine really liked her and Chloe as a couple, so now she adds a few nice words about Damon. But Chloe is not interested in this lyrical garbage, and she angrily asks what the magician finally said, and Blair replies that he did not take payment because he saw something interesting in her. This situation does not seem to be in favor of the young mistress, so she demands to throw away the potion, which our heroine is a little offended by, because she tried to get this thing. In addition, as long as Chloe wants it, Blair is forbidden to leave the territory of the mansion, which puts moral pressure on the girl, who does not understand what she did. Hearing notes of disobedience, Chloe turns, glaring at the maid, causing her to perk up and agree to stay for the required period. And besides, Blair must bring a doll for the mistress, which she does, choosing a white rabbit as a suitable one. Although Mistress is not happy that the doll does not look like a person, Blair is glad that she can present something to Chloe. She, in turn, is trying with all her might to express dissatisfaction with such a simple toy. Feeling a little sad about this, our heroine asks if her powers were really used in vain. She hangs her head, holding this doll in her hands, which she herself bought with her own money, as she wanted to give her an independent gift. "It's not that important," Chloe says quietly, and takes the doll from the girl's hands to herself, intending to do with it what she wanted. Now that she has the doll, she can try a new ritual, and for this she needs to be in silence, preferably concentrating. The hair she had just pulled out suddenly became a bright purple thread in the hands of Chloe, who was casting the spell. With the brightest part, she sticks it into the rabbit, as if transferring her energy into it, while still chanting the spell. A few moments later, the rabbit itself begins to emit a pink glow, as if a vessel filled to the brim with water, and Chloe finishes the spell.